You know that moment when you realize you've been the biggest fool in the room? When everything you thought you knew about your life turns out to be built on assumptions and wishful thinking. I'm having that moment right now, sitting in my studio apartment that smells like the Indian restaurant downstairs, staring at a stack of legal papers that might as well be written in Sanskrit for all the good they're doing me. My name is Adeline Duke, and I just made the biggest mistake of my life. Though if I'm being honest, and I guess it's time for that, the mistake wasn't the divorce itself. The mistake was listening to my friends and believing that love could be traded for a comfortable retirement plan. It all started about 8 months ago at Brunch Club. That's what we called our monthly get-togethers, me, Patricia, Candace, and Joanna. We'd been meeting for brunch every second Saturday for nearly 5 years, ever since we all ended up in the same Pilates class and bonded over our mutual hatred of burpees and our shared love of mimosas. We had our usual table at Rosie's Diner, the one by the window where we could watch the Saturday morning joggers pretend they weren't dying. Patricia was going through her own divorce proceedings, her second one, actually, and she was practically glowing with the satisfaction of someone who'd just been awarded a very generous settlement. "I'm telling you, Addie," she said, stabbing her eggs Benedict with unnecessary force. "You're sitting on a gold mine and you don't even realize it." I should have known right then that this conversation was going to lead me somewhere I didn't want to go. Patricia had this way of making every personal decision sound like a business transaction. She'd married her first husband because he had a trust fund, divorced him when she found out it was smaller than advertised, then married husband number 2 for his medical practice. Now she was single again and shopping for husband number 3 with the methodical approach of someone choosing a mutual fund. "What are you talking about?" I asked, though I had a sinking feeling I already knew. Candace leaned forward, lowering her voice like she was sharing state secrets. "Your husband, honey. Nolan's been building that engineering firm of his for what, 8 years now? And you said yourself business has been booming since they landed that city contract." "The water treatment plant project," Joanna added helpfully. She worked in city planning, so she knew these things. "That's a multi-million-dollar deal, Addie. Multi-million." I felt my stomach twist. So, Patricia said, like she was explaining basic math to a kindergartner. "You've been married for 7 years. In this state, that means you're entitled to half of everything he's accumulated during the marriage. The business, the house, the investments, all of it." I want to tell you I shut that conversation down right there. I want to say I stood up for my marriage and told my friends they were being ridiculous, but I didn't. Instead, I sat there and let their words sink in like poison. The truth was, things between Nolan and me had been difficult lately. Not bad exactly, but different. He'd been working longer hours as his business grew, and I'd been feeling more and more like I was living parallel to his life instead of sharing it. We still loved each other, I was sure of that. But somewhere between the mortgage payments and the routine of marriage, we'd lost some of that spark we used to have. And if I'm being brutally honest, which I guess I have to be now, I was tired. Tired of being careful with money while Nolan reinvested everything back into the business. Tired of driving my 10-year-old Honda while he talked about expansion plans. Tired of putting off vacations and home improvements because next year will be better. Patricia must have seen something in my face because she pounced. "I'm not saying you don't love him, sweetie, but love doesn't pay for retirement. Love doesn't take care of you if something happens to him. You need to think practically. Besides," Candace added, "you could probably get spousal support too. You've been supporting his career all these years, putting your own ambitions on hold. That has value." This was true, actually. I'd had a decent job at a marketing firm when Nolan and I got married, but I'd given it up when he started the business and needed someone to handle his bookkeeping and administrative work. I'd told myself it was temporary, just until he could afford to hire proper staff. That was 7 years ago. "I don't know," I said weakly. "It feels wrong calculating like this." Joanna reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "It's not calculating, it's being smart. You think men don't think about this stuff? You think Nolan hasn't considered what would happen if you two split up?" I doubted that, actually. Nolan wasn't the calculating type. He was the type who'd give you his last $20 if you needed it, who still held doors open for strangers, and who'd never once made me feel like his success was more important than our marriage. But my friends planted a seed that day, and once it was there, I couldn't stop it from growing. Over the next few weeks, I found myself paying attention to things I'd never noticed before. The way Nolan checked his business accounts every morning, the expensive equipment deliveries to his shop, the new contracts he'd mentioned casually over dinner. I started doing my own research. I looked up the public records for the city contract Joanna had mentioned. I researched average settlements in divorce cases involving business assets. I even made a secret appointment with a lawyer, just for information, I told myself, just to understand my options. The lawyer, a sharp-dressed woman named Helen Cartwright, was very encouraging. "Your husband's business has tripled in value since you married," she said, sliding a folder across her desk. "Given your contributions to the company's success, you'd have a strong claim to a significant portion of that value." "My contributions?" I asked. "You provided the administrative support during the crucial early years. You made financial sacrifices to support the business. You could argue that your unpaid labor was instrumental in the company's success." She made it sound so reasonable, so fair, like I was finally standing up for myself instead of plotting to take advantage of someone who'd never done anything but love me. The breaking point came on a Wednesday evening in November. Nolan came home late again, looking exhausted and covered in concrete dust from a job site visit. I was in the kitchen, supposedly making dinner, but really stewing in my own resentment. "Sorry I'm late," he said, kissing my cheek. "The project is behind schedule, and we had to—" "We?" I interrupted. "Since when is it we? I'm not the one making decisions about your business." He stopped, his jacket halfway off his shoulders. "Addie, what's wrong? You sound angry." And suddenly, I was. All the conversations with my friends, all the research, all the feeling sorry for myself came pouring out. "I'm angry," I said. "I'm angry that I've spent 7 years helping build something that I have no real part in. I'm angry that you make all the financial decisions while I'm supposed to just smile and trust that you know what's best for us." Nolan set his jacket down slowly. "That's not fair. We discuss everything important. And the business, you know that's our future. I'm building something that will take care of us." "Will it?" "Because from where I'm sitting, it feels like you're building something that takes care of you. Where's my name on the business documents? Where's my guarantee that I'll see any benefit from all this sacrifice I've been making?" I can still see the look on his face. Confused, hurt, like I'd just spoken to him in a foreign language. "Addie, we're married. What's mine is yours. I thought you understood that." "Words are easy, Nolan, but legally, practically, I have nothing. If something happened to you tomorrow, if we got divorced, what would I have to show for these 7 years?" The word divorce hung in the air between us like a toxic cloud. I hadn't meant to say it, at least I don't think I had, but once it was out there, I couldn't take it back. "Is that what you want?" he asked quietly. "A divorce?" I should have said no. I should have apologized and explained that I was just feeling insecure, that my friends had gotten into my head, but I didn't. Instead, I said something that still makes me sick to think about. Maybe I need to start thinking about what's best for me, instead of always putting your dreams first. That conversation was like pulling a thread that unraveled everything. Over the next few days, Nolan and I barely spoke. He started sleeping in the guest room. I called Patricia and told her what had happened, and she was thrilled. "Good for you," she said. "It's about time you stood up for yourself. Did you talk to that lawyer I recommended?" I hadn't told her about Helen Cartwright. I might do it and document everything, his business records, your contributions, everything. The more evidence you have, the better your settlement will be. So I did. I made copies of financial statements. I documented the hours I'd spent doing unpaid work for the business. I built a case against my own husband like I was preparing for war. The crazy thing is, Nolan made it easy. He didn't hide anything from me. His computer password was still Addie+1, the same password he'd been using since we started dating. His business files were in a drawer in our shared home office. He trusted me completely, even as I was systematically gathering evidence to use against him. The final push came 2 weeks later at another brunch club meeting. I'd been wavering, starting to have second thoughts about what I was doing, but Patricia had news that changed everything. "I talked to my lawyer about your situation," she announced, practically vibrating with excitement. "She thinks you could walk away with at least $2 million, maybe more. Nolan's business is worth way more than you realized." $2 million. The number hit me like a physical blow. I tried to imagine what that would mean: financial independence, the ability to go back to school, to travel, to never worry about money again. Plus spousal support, Candace added. "Given the discrepancy in your earning potential after being out of the workforce, you could probably get a substantial monthly payment." "You'd be set for life," Joanna said. "And Nolan would still have his business. It's not like you'd be destroying him." That night, I made the decision. I called Helen Cartwright and scheduled an appointment to file divorce papers. Nolan was served at his office on a Friday afternoon. I'd planned it that way, thinking it would be less traumatic than having the papers delivered to our home. I was wrong about that, like I was wrong about so many things. He came home that evening looking like someone had died. He found me in the kitchen, where I was pretending to be busy organizing the spice rack. "Addie," he said, and his voice was so quiet I almost didn't hear him. "Can we talk?" I turned around, trying to look determined instead of guilty. "There's nothing to talk about. I've made my decision." He sat down heavily at the kitchen table, the divorce papers spread out in front of him. "I don't understand. I thought we were just having a rough patch. I thought we could work through it." "Some things can't be worked through, Nolan." "But why? What did I do wrong? If it's about money, if you want more involvement in the business, we can figure that out. You could become a partner, we could—" "It's too late for that," I said, though my heart was breaking at the desperate hope in his voice. "I've already made up my mind." He stared at me for a long moment, and I could see him trying to process what was happening. "Is there someone else?" This isn't about another person." "Then what?" "Help me understand." I wanted to tell him about my friends, about the lawyer, about the calculations and the research and the promise of financial security. But instead, I said, "I just don't love you anymore." It was a lie. Maybe the biggest lie I've ever told. But it was the one thing I thought would make him stop fighting for us, and I was right. The hope died in his eyes, and he nodded slowly. "Okay," he said. "If that's how you feel, I won't contest it." The next few weeks passed in a blur of legal meetings and paperwork. Helen was confident and aggressive, demanding everything from half the business value to spousal support to compensation for my unpaid contributions. Nolan's lawyer, an older man named Frank Henley, seemed almost sad during our negotiations. "Your husband doesn't want to fight this," he told Helen during one of our meetings. "He just wants it to be over as quickly and quietly as possible." I should have felt victorious. Instead, I felt hollow. Everything was going according to plan until we hit a snag during the asset evaluation phase. Helen called me on a Monday morning, and I could hear something different in her voice. "Adeline, we need to talk. Can you come in this afternoon?" When I arrived at her office, she had a stack of financial documents spread across her desk, and an expression I couldn't read. "We've run into a problem," she said, without preamble. "During the discovery process, we've learned some things about your husband's business that complicate our strategy." "What kind of things?" She consulted her notes. "It turns out that the majority of your husband's business assets, including the equipment, the building, and even the contracts, are heavily leveraged. He's borrowed against almost everything to fund expansion." I felt a cold knot forming in my stomach. What does that mean? It means that while the business has a high gross value, the net value is much lower than we initially calculated. After debts and obligations, you'd be looking at maybe $300,000 instead of $2 million. $300,000. Still a significant amount, but nowhere near the life-changing sum I'd been expecting. "But that's not the worst part," Helen continued. We also discovered that your husband has been quietly paying into a substantial life insurance policy with you as the beneficiary. The premiums have been coming out of business profits for the past 5 years. I don't understand. How is that bad for me? It's not bad for you financially. The policy is worth $1.5 million. But it raises questions about his intentions, combined with the fact that he's been living very modestly despite the business's apparent success. It suggests that he's been planning for your financial security all along. The rooms start to spin. What are you saying? I'm saying your husband has been quietly building a safety net for you while reinvesting everything else into the business. The life insurance, the business structure, even the way he's handled the marital assets. It all points to someone who is thinking about your future together. I left Helen's office in a daze and drove aimlessly around town for hours. Everything my friends had told me, everything I'd believed about Nolan's selfishness and my lack of security, was wrong. He hadn't been keeping me in the dark about finances to control me. He'd been protecting me in ways I never even knew to look for. That evening, I found myself parked outside his new apartment. He'd moved out 2 weeks earlier, as requested in the separation agreement. I sat there for almost an hour, trying to work up the courage to knock on his door. When I finally did, he looked surprised to see me. "Addie, is everything okay? Did something happen?" Even in the middle of our divorce, his first instinct was to worry about me. I started crying right there in his doorway. "Can I come in? Please?" He stepped aside, and I found myself in a sparse one-bedroom apartment that looked like a hotel room. There were no pictures on the walls, no personal touches. Just the bare minimum of furniture and a stack of business files on the kitchen table. "I talked to my lawyer today," I began. "Okay." His voice was carefully neutral. "She told me about the life insurance policy." Nolan closed his eyes. "I was wondering when that would come up. Why didn't you tell me? Would it have mattered?" The question hung between us, and I realized I didn't know the answer. Would it have changed anything if I'd known about his quiet efforts to secure my future? Or would I have just seen it as more evidence that he had money he wasn't sharing? "I don't know," I admitted. "I set up that policy the year we got married," he said quietly. "I wanted to make sure that if anything happened to me, you'd be taken care of. I increased it every time the business did well." "But you never told me." "I wanted it to be a surprise, a good surprise, for our 10th anniversary. I was going to give you the policy documents and tell you that you never had to worry about money again, no matter what happened." I felt like someone had punched me in the chest. "Nolan, I know what you must think of me," he continued. "I know it seemed like I was being selfish, putting the business first, but everything I was doing was for us. The long hours, the reinvestment, the careful budgeting. I was trying to build something that would let us retire early, travel, maybe buy that house on the lake you always talked about." I spent the rest of that week in a fog of regret and self-recrimination. But it wasn't until the following Saturday that I understood just how thoroughly I'd been manipulated. I met Patricia for coffee, just the two of us this time. I'd been planning to tell her about my change of heart, about wanting to call off the divorce, but she started talking before I could say anything. "I heard through the grapevine that the settlement isn't going to be as big as we thought," she said, not bothering with pleasantries. "How did you hear that?" "Helen Cartwright is friends with my lawyer. Word gets around." She stirred her latte aggressively. "It's disappointing, but $300,000 is still nothing to sneeze at. Actually, I've been thinking. The important thing is that you're getting out," she continued, cutting me off. "Marriage is a trap, Addie. Look at me. I've been divorced twice, and I'm happier than I've ever been. Freedom is worth more than money." Something in her tone made me look at her more closely. "Patricia, why were you so eager for me to get divorced?" She laughed, but it sounded forced. "I was looking out for you, obviously." "Were you?" "Because it feels like you were projecting your own situation onto mine." "Don't be ridiculous." But suddenly, it all made sense. Patricia's enthusiasm for my divorce, her constant pressure, her friends in the legal community who just happened to have information about Nolan's business. "You needed me to get divorced," I said slowly. You needed another woman in our group who was single and bitter. You were tired of being the only one. Patricia's face went red. That's not, it is, though. Misery loves company, and you were miserable. So you convinced me to blow up my marriage because you couldn't stand being around a happy couple. She stood up abruptly. I was trying to help you see reality. Your marriage was already over, Addie. I just helped you admit it. But I knew that wasn't true. My marriage hadn't been over. It had been going through a rough patch, like all marriages do. It had needed work and communication and commitment. Instead, I'd let Patricia poison it with her cynicism and greed. I called Nolan that night, but it went to voicemail. I tried again the next morning and the next evening. Finally, he answered on the fourth try. Adeline, is this about the legal proceedings? No, it's can we meet? Please, I need to talk to you. There was a long pause. I don't think that's a good idea. Please, Nolan, just coffee, 30 minutes. Another pause. Okay, the diner on 5th Street. Tomorrow at noon. I got there early and sat in a corner booth, nervously rehearsing what I wanted to say. When Nolan arrived, he looked older somehow. The stress of the past few months had carved new lines around his eyes. What did you want to talk about? He asked, sliding into the seat across from me. I want to call off the divorce. His face didn't change. Why? Because I made a mistake. A huge, horrible mistake. I let my friends convince me that you were taking advantage of me, that I deserved more than what we had. But they were wrong, and I was wrong. What changed your mind? I told him about the life insurance policy, about Patricia's manipulation, about everything I'd realized in the past week. He listened without comment, his expression unreadable. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. I appreciate you telling me this, he said finally, but it doesn't change anything. What do you mean? You told me you didn't love me anymore. You filed for divorce based on that. Were you lying? I felt my face burn with shame. Yes, I was lying. Why? Because I thought it would be easier than explaining about the money and the lawyers and my friends. I thought if I made it about love instead of greed, you'd just let me go. He nodded slowly. You were right. I would have fought for the marriage if I thought you still loved me. But I won't fight for someone who doesn't want to be fought for. But I do want... No, he said, and his voice was firm. You wanted a divorce, Adeline. You researched it, planned it, and executed it. You gathered evidence against me like I was your enemy. You made your choice. I can change, I said desperately. I can be better. I know I made mistakes, but we can work through them. Nolan shook his head. It's not about the mistakes. It's about trust. How can I ever trust you again? How can I share my life with someone who was secretly planning to take half of it? I wanted to argue, to tell him that what I'd done wasn't who I really was. But the truth was, it was exactly who I was. When things got difficult, when I felt insecure, instead of talking to my husband, I'd talk to lawyers. Instead of working on our marriage, I'd worked on ending it. I'm sorry, I whispered. I know you are, and I forgive you. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and it doesn't mean going back to the way things were. He stood up to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, I did love you. I loved you enough to spend 7 years building a future for us. I loved you enough to keep fighting for our marriage, even when you'd already given up on it. I loved you enough to let you go when you said that's what you wanted. The divorce was finalized 2 months later. In the end, the settlement was even smaller than Helen had projected. Just over $200,000 after legal fees and debt obligations. Not exactly the windfall my friends had promised. Nolan sold the business 6 months after our divorce became final. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he'd moved to Colorado to start over. He sent me a check for an additional $50,000 with a note that said, "Your share of the sale. I hope it helps you build the life you wanted." Even after everything I'd put him through, he was still trying to take care of me. I used the money to rent this apartment and go back to school. I'm studying accounting now. Figured I should learn how to manage money properly since I'd done such a terrible job of understanding it in my marriage. Patricia and I don't speak anymore. Candace and Joanna stopped inviting me to Brunch Club after I called them out for encouraging my divorce. I miss the friendship we used to have, but I don't miss the toxicity that came with it. People ask me sometimes if I regret the divorce. The honest answer is that I regret everything about how it happened. I regret listening to friends who had their own agendas. I regret not trusting the man I married. I regret not communicating my fears and insecurities instead of turning them into resentment. But mostly, I regret that I was so focused on what I thought I deserved that I forgot to appreciate what I actually had. Nolan wasn't perfect. He worked too much. He wasn't always the best communicator. And yes, he could have done a better job of including me in financial decisions. But he was a good man who loved me genuinely and was building a life for us, not just for himself. I threw that away because my friends convinced me I could do better, financially speaking. What they didn't tell me, what they probably didn't understand themselves, is that you can't build a better life on the ruins of someone else's trust. The real kicker? I found out last month that Nolan got remarried. Her name is Sarah, she's a teacher, and from what I can see on social media, she looks happy, really genuinely happy. He deserves that. As for me, I'm learning to be content with the life I chose. It's smaller than what I had with Nolan, quieter, and sometimes lonely. But it's honest, and it's mine. That has to count for something. The next time someone tells me I deserve more than what I have, I'm going to ask them a simple question, more than what? Because I had love, partnership, security, and a future with someone who cared about me. In what universe is that not enough? I know now that it was always enough. It was everything. And I traded it for the promise of money that turned out to be mostly imaginary anyway. Some lessons you can only learn the hard way. Mine cost me the best thing I ever had. And there's no appeal process for that kind of stupidity. All I can do now is try to be smarter next time, if there is a next time. But I'm not holding my breath. Good men like Nolan don't come around twice. And women like me don't deserve second chances at happiness we were too foolish to recognize the first time around. That's my story. Not pretty, not noble, and definitely not the fairy tale ending I thought I was smart enough to engineer. But it's the truth, and maybe that's worth something too.